Welcome to The Explainer. For decades, directed energy weapons, like high-energy lasers, have kind of felt like pure science fiction, right? Just confined to lab tests and these flashy one-off demonstrations. Well, that era is officially over. Today, we're unpacking a massive transformation happening right now in the defense sector. We're talking about the rapid shift from R&D prototypes to deployable, layered laser defense systems actually rolling out onto the battlefield. Let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the DU inflection point, then look beyond the laser beam itself, dive into the actual economics of directed energy, and finally wrap up with a corporate profile on Elbit systems.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the directed energy inflection, moving from R&D to real-world procurement. So to put a real number on this transition, the global directed energy weapons market is sitting at an estimated $4.2 billion in 2025, but it's projected to scale up to roughly $7.4 billion by 2031. That is a near 10% annual growth rate. So what's actually driving that multi-billion-dollar surge? Simply put, it's a fundamental change in what defense buyers are actually looking for. We are witnessing a massive paradigm shift here. Think about the old market. The goal back then was really just proving a single beam could defeat a single target. It was super heavy on research, testing, and evaluation. But the new market? Buyers absolutely do not want one-off science projects anymore. They want complete, repeatable weapon systems that are fully integrated into layered air defense. And a big reason for this is countering those massive, inexpensive drone swarms we keep seeing. Buyers are now prioritizing cyber resilience, weather sensitivity, and figuring out exactly how these lasers actually play alongside traditional missiles.
And hey, this isn't just theoretical modeling anymore. We are entering a true scale-up phase out in the real world. Just look at the recent momentum. In June 2025, the U.S. Army tested 50-kilowatt systems in layered defense scenarios. Then, by August, we saw a massive 71 million euro export order for a 100-kilowatt class laser. And hitting November, the UK awarded a £360 million contract to literally deploy the Dragonfire laser on Royal Navy destroyers. So yeah, operational production is happening right in front of us.
Moving on to Section 2, beyond the laser beam. Let's look at the hidden bottlenecks of directed energy. When you picture a laser weapon, you're probably just thinking about the beam, right? But if we use an iceberg metaphor here, it reveals a pretty shocking reality. That actual laser energy source, it makes up only about 5% of the system's total value. The real heavy lifting is completely hidden beneath the surface. A staggering 40% of the value is actually locked up in power generation, energy storage, and thermal management. Add in another 25% for beam control and tracking, and you quickly realize the weapon effect itself is just a tiny fraction of the whole machine. So the true industrial bottlenecks aren't really the lasers themselves. The real engineering nightmare here is holding that immense energy on a fast-moving, maneuvering target without completely melting the vehicle it's attached to. You need incredibly precise beam control just to cut through fog, dust, or rain. You need massive amounts of electrical power, and crucially, you have to have extreme thermal management to reject all that immense heat being generated. And you have to do all of that while squeezing into the strict weight and size limits of a truck, a ship, or an aircraft. It's a massive challenge. All right, let's transition to Section 3, the economics of DEU. We'll compare cost per shot versus life cycle reality. There is this really stark contrast between the flashy headline advantages you read about in the news and the harsh financial realities defense buyers actually have to model out. Sure, you get a seemingly unlimited magazine depth because you're literally firing electricity, but buyers still have to calculate thermal recovery and battery recharge rates. You definitely get speed of light delivery, but you also have to factor in dwell time, how long the laser actually has to stay locked on to destroy a target, as well as some pretty strict weather limitations. And nowhere is this headline advantage more aggressively publicized than with the cost per shot. Public programs absolutely love touting this metric. The UK, for example, cites a cost of roughly £10, which is about $13 per shot for its Dragonfire system. Now, when you compare $13 to a traditional interceptor missile that can run hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, the economic case against cheap drone swarms feels instantly undeniable, doesn't it? But we really need to ground ourselves in economic reality here. While the variable cost of pulling the trigger is literally just a few dollars, the total life cycle cost is a completely different beast. Once you bake in open architecture software upgrades, test calibrations, spare parts, highly complex cooling maintenance, and of course, crew training, that total life cycle spend can approach nearly twice the initial acquisition price. So it's an incredibly attractive model for sure, but the business case is vastly more complex than just cheap electricity.
Let's move into our final section, Part 4, a corporate profile on Elbit Systems and looking at ESG in the defense sector. To really understand corporate responsibility in this highly sensitive space, we're looking at Elbit Systems' 2026 profile on the Mahala ESG Index. Now, Mahala is a major corporate rating organization, and Elbit has actually been rated by them since 2006. Operating in the electronics and defense sector, they achieved an overall 2026 rating of AA Platinum Plus, which places them in the Advanced Inclusion Index category. So let's break down what's actually driving that high rating. When we look closely at their specific scoring pillars, we see perfect marks of 10 out of 10 in both ethics and core values and ESG management and reporting. That shows some really stringent regulatory compliance. However, their environment and sustainability score sits at an 8 out of 10. While that's still very strong, it perfectly reflects the intense industrial realities we were just talking about. Manufacturing these complex defense platforms with massive power and thermal requirements inherently creates some pretty major environmental challenges when it comes to energy, water, and waste management. It's also really important to note where there's room for growth. In diversity, inclusion, and gender equality, Elbit scored a 7 out of 10. While they maintain perfect scores in workplace safety and board responsibilities, this specific metric indicates an ongoing area of focus for the company. It's a pretty common challenge in the defense tech space, specifically regarding gender balance and employing diverse populations.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. Directed energy is clearly no longer just a science project. It's a multi-billion-dollar reality that is actively reshaping global air defense as we speak. But I want to leave you with this thought. As these lasers make the jump from the perfectly controlled environment of a lab to the chaotic, harsh reality of the battlefield, is the defense industry truly ready to overcome the immense thermal, operational, and ethical bottlenecks that lie ahead? The transition has officially begun, but mastering the complete system, well, that's the true challenge of the next decade. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep questioning what's on the horizon.